Madam Speaker, this bill, as it stood at second reading, was a remarkable piece of legislation. But now, having gone through the bill committee stage, I believe it has improved further. And now, at its third reading, its legislation, when it comes, will be, the whole House should be very, very proud of it. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill sits on a long and impressive list of legislation that successive Conservative governments have introduced over the last 30 years. The Children's Act 1989, the 1997 Protection from Harassment Act, creating the offence of harassment, the 2012 Protection of Freedom Act, which created the offence of stalking, the 2015 Modern Slavery Act, which our Right Honourable friend from Maidenhead put through the House, which created the offences regarding slavery, servitude, human trafficking and provision for protection of victims.
Would she give way?
Certainly will.
I thank the honourable lady for giving way. She and I served on the Bill Committee together, and I completely agree with everything she's saying. But would she agree with me that bringing forward this bill right now during the coronavirus pandemic and pushing it forward throughout the lockdown is another piece of evidence for this government's support for victims?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. Carrying on the list, the Serious Crime Act 2015, which created the offence of coercive control, and in 2017 the Conservative government doubled the maximum sentence for stalking, and in 2019 passed the Stalking Protection Act, creating stalking protection orders, which leads us today to this domestic abuse bill, which I dearly hope we will see into law shortly. An impressive history from this side of the chamber, taking strong, decisive and meaningful action to protect those who are unable to protect themselves and giving a voice to the most vulnerable. I think it is also important to note the notable gap of such laws between 1997 and 2010. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have been honoured to sit on the Domestic Abuse Bill, my first bill as a Member of Parliament. And I think it's important to say that during the second reading debate and on my tenure on the Bill Committee, I highlighted the need to amend the definition of domestic abuse to include children within households where such abuse is present, to recognise children as the victims of abuse, not just as witnesses. It is estimated that up to 30% of children live in a household where abuse is taking place. Until now, the children were hidden victims of domestic abuse, who were never directly affected. But we know this isn't true. The children's services teams up and down the country, children's charities such as Bernardo's and the Children's Society, see every day the devastating effects witnessing such abuse can have on a child's development, their education attainment and their long-term mental health. I saw it myself as Children's Services Lead at Westminster. Home is meant to be our place of safety, where we are loved, cherished the most. But for some children, home becomes a torture chamber, waking up every morning, not knowing whether a tiny mistake will lead to violence and the type of abuse most of us could never imagine. As well as my experience within children's services, my campaign to seek this amendment to the definition was also sparked from hearing the experiences of a constituent of mine who has become a friend, the broadcaster Charlie Webster. Charlie has told me her story of growing up in a home where domestic abuse at the hands of her stepfather had a devastating effect on her, her mum and her brothers. Charlie is a survivor and now a strong campaigner for a better understanding of the effects witnessing domestic abuse can have on a child, and I thank her today for helping me clearly understand why the definition had to be amended. I therefore wholeheartedly support and welcome the government's new Clause 15, recognising children as victims of abuse within their households. I am pleased that for the purpose of this new clause, the child is recognised as someone under 18, so will include teenagers and young adults who, although maybe more developed than their young peers, are still forming an understanding of the world around them. It is very important to me to highlight the need to amend the definition to include children and why I lobbied ministers to accept the need for the amendment. And I'm delighted that they listened. In fact, the government has listened throughout this process. In closing, I would like to pay tribute to the ministers who have led on this legislation. My honourable friends, the member for Lawn and Hornchurch and for Cheltenham. As a new MP, I've been in awe of both their attention to detail, but also their willingness to listen to all sides of the House, to victims and to organisations working within domestic abuse. And also I pay tribute to the Home Secretary and the Lord Chancellor for their work on this. The amendments that have been accepted are testament to the ambitions of this government and their own ambitions, that this bill will make a long-lasting and fundamental difference. And I commend this vital and groundbreaking domestic abuse bill to the House.